Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Trails Radio Show. I hope you all are doing well this fine Monday morning. Join us in a second when we interview our guest today. Thank you, and join us in a minute. My first question to you is, how did you get started in your career? How did your career begin?
Well, which career are you talking about? I've had a couple.
Your first career. What was the first career you got into?
My first career was in quality control. I was an automotive quality control manager for about 35 years. And I started out just as I moved to California after the military from New York. And I went to work actually assembling electronic components for calculators. And back then the calculators were big, like cash register size, and they had tubes. The tubes were in the shape of LEDs, and they lit up. But anyway, make a long story short, I went from being an inspector to being a supervisor to being a manager, and then I went from California back to New York, actually Long Island, where I became a quality manager and worked with automotive companies and traveled all over the world doing troubleshooting for automotive companies, mostly Ford.
Oh, wow.
And that's how I started. Yeah, that's how I started my first career. And I did that for probably about 35 years while I was raising my family and earning a living. Mm-hmm. And now I'm getting to do what I really want to do, which is doing radio and selling books and being an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah. Well, how did you get started in radio?
Well, it was a very, very interesting thing. You know, sometimes we put off our dreams for a long, long time. And as I said, I was raising a family. I always wanted to be in radio. I remember when I was a little kid, I used to listen to AM radio with my earphones in, and I would stay up all night during the summer listening to the oldies. And as a matter of fact, the station I work for now is an oldies station. But getting back to when I was a kid, I mean, I was so in love with radio. I used to open the radios up and tinker with them and play with the tuning controls and all that stuff. And I would get different frequencies. But anyway, I bought a walkie-talkie, and then later on I got into CB. And then I got into ham radio. And there are different classes for ham radio operators, and I went from being a technician class, which was one of the lowest, to an extra class. And the higher your class, the more privileges you get with ham radio. And I got enough privileges to be able to talk all over the world. And that was really, really cool. And then
wow.
I know that's a long, long story, and I'm not finished with it, but what I'm trying to say is that I really put everything off by raising the family, but I was always in love with radio. And funny thing, the first thing I did when I was in the Army is I took a test, and I didn't know what I wanted to do in the Army, but they give you a whole bunch of tests and see what you're good at. And lo and behold, my scores were the highest in electronics. So they trained me for electronics for a year, and I became a radio operator, radio technician, and a radio repairman in the military. So then it's amazing because I'm retired now. I'm 68 years old, and I'm living a life of luxury in beautiful Myrtle Beach, where it's sunny and beautiful out here. Anyway, so what happened was I didn't want to just lie around retired doing nothing. So what I did was I took my quality control resume and I walked it around to radio stations. And I heard a station that I absolutely loved. It was an oldies station, and I heard it while I was driving. I have Sirius radio and all that, but I heard a station that I absolutely loved. It was playing golden oldies, and I took my resume down to the station, not knowing whether I would get actually an opportunity to even talk with the station or drop off a resume. But I called and told them I had a resume in hand, and I dropped it off. And at the time, like I said, I didn't want to just lie around doing nothing. So I said to the station manager, after I met him, I said, listen, I'll work for free. I'll do whatever you want. I'll sweep your floors. I'll take out your trash, whatever. I just want to hang around the radio station. And he said to me, well, I don't need anybody to sweep my floors. He said, but I do need somebody to sell some ads. And I thought to myself, wow, I never saw an ad in my life. And I said, yep, I'm your man. So I went out and I started selling radio ads. But in the meantime, while I'm selling ads, I actually got a chance to do a lot of the voiceovers in these ads. So now, not only am I selling ads, but I'm actually doing radio commercials and voiceover work. So, man, after all those years of loving radio, I finally get a chance to do what I always loved.
Oh yeah, dreams come true.
They absolutely do. If you follow them, no matter how old you are, you will. They will come true for you no matter what. All you need to do is follow them.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. My next question is, what do you find is the most challenging part being in radio for you? What do you find is very difficult or challenging?
The most difficult part is making cold calls, just getting on the phone and calling people you've never spoken to and convincing them or finding out why they would it would be to their advantage to be on the radio, have their company advertise on the radio. Because, as you know, everything is digital. People are, everybody has satellite radios. Everybody's got Sirius XM, and people, they say they don't listen to the radio, but that's how I found my favorite station. So it's really difficult calling strangers or going into a business with your business card and a folder and saying, hey, my name is Robert Romaniello, and I work for WLMC in Georgetown, South Carolina, and I think you need to be on the radio. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like that too, when I have to pick up the phone to call people to interview,
right.
To first talk to them.
Right.
But once I start talking, but at first I'm very shy, but once I get going, I talk,
Well, you're going now. So I guess you must feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, once I get started doing an interview, the conversation flows and...
Right. I know you've got your challenges, and you know what? I really honor you for not only overcoming those challenges, but like you say, following your dream, and they will come true.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So congratulations. And I think your next question is going to be, what's the easiest thing I find on my job, right?
Yeah, well, you enjoy doing radio, so there must be, as well, there are challenges, but there must be some fun times to it, too. That's why you do it.
Well, that's exactly right. I love being on the radio. I love being behind the microphone. I love actually hanging around and watching the dials and watching the meters go. I really do love it. I always did. And the most fun, I tell you what, I love meeting people. And because I represent a radio station, there are a lot of after-hours meetings and greetings that I get to attend that are offered by the local Chamber of Commerce. And they really do a good job of getting all the business leaders together. And I love meeting and greeting people. I really, really do. And, I find it really, really easy to walk over to a stranger. And I never did. I was an introvert most of my life. But I enjoy now walking over to a stranger and saying, hi, I'm Robert. How are you? and it goes from there.
Yeah. Yeah, you meet a lot of interesting people when you're in broadcasting or radio, in that industry. And
it's amazing. I get to meet the sheriff. I get to meet the mayor. I get to meet all of the business leaders. I get to meet people that are in bands, and some of the realtors are in bands. And it's amazing what people do as a sidelight. So it's fantastic. It's very, very interesting, and that's probably the biggest advantage or the biggest benefit that I find in being in radio is that I get to meet a lot of really, really interesting people, the most prominent people in the business and private community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, connections and networking, that comes hand in hand too,
It's all about networking, my friend.
My next question to you is, besides doing radio, you've also written a book. Could you explain that?
Yep. When I was in Vietnam a long, long time ago, during another lifetime in another century, there was something there called Agent Orange. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yes, I have.
Okay, for people that are listening that haven't heard of Agent Orange, it was what the Army called a defoliant. Because the enemy hid under trees and bushes and stuff like that in the jungle, the military thought it would be a great idea to just spray the trees and everything and kill all the trees so we could see the enemy. And it was called Agent Orange. It was made by the same people, I believe, that make Roundup. And I think you know about the lawsuits these days. Mm-hmm. But so they sprayed not only the jungles, but they also inadvertently sprayed people in the military. And as a result, I was diagnosed in 2005 with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had tumors all over my body and my stomach, and my kidney was blocked. I was in such pain. I just walked into a doctor's office and I said, "You need to give me a CAT scan now." And they did, and they found out that I was almost dead. And as a result of having been sprayed from Agent Orange in Vietnam. So the most devastating thing that could happen to a person is to be diagnosed with a terminal disease. Anyway, never thought I'd beat it, but I did. And the memories of Vietnam started coming back to me. And I decided to put it down in pencil and paper and type it. And some of the most bizarre and some of the most horrifying and some of the most pleasant memories came back to me. Mm-hmm. And that was a time of my life that, although it was hard, although I didn't know I would live to the next day, that being in Vietnam was probably the most personally developing and enlightening experiences that I had in my entire life.
Yeah.
And that's what the book is about. The book is called Vietnam, the Enemy Within. And really, I joined the military because I wanted to serve my country. But when I went to Vietnam, it didn't take me long to realize that maybe we shouldn't have been there. And I started having my doubts as to why we were there 12,000 miles away from home trying to defend our country. It just didn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. And so the Enemy Within really is all about conquering yourself. In other words, I had to learn all about self-control and how things can be out of control. And it wasn't only a personal story, it was also a story about the military and about our efforts in Vietnam. And each one of the chapters in the book, and the book is about 182 pages with notes and all that. But first of all, each one of the chapters is titled with the name of a song that was very, very popular at the time. And at the end of the book, there is a playlist that you can enjoy. But in every chapter, the chapter begins with some historical reference of the time, a speech that was made by President Johnson or by Kennedy or by Martin Luther King, and all of the leaders that were either for or against the war. And so you see how the war developed and how we ended up having, I went to a place called Da Nang. And Da Nang at the time had the world's busiest airport and had probably 500,000 people there, stationed there. And so it was a little America in in a country that knew nothing about